said, show me the way. Well, show me the way home. Just a man, so wonderful. Thought this world could offer so much more. So damn long.
Hello, humans. This is the Quote of the Day Slackline coming at you again on Monday, January 15th, 2018. This is the boss.
The boss is coming.
That's a made-up dumb fairy tale name, you
Coming at you from Vancouver, Canada. It's a nice sunny day here, and as usual, we are chatting quotes of the day, quotes we hear around town, quotes I look up, anything that piques our interest. Greg, who are we brought to you by today? Let's take a look here. Brought to you by today, NuCone Portable Nuclear Holocaust Protector. Get a message from your government to seek immediate shelter? Hear that fatal whistle above your head? Why don't you try a NuCone Portable Nuclear Holocaust Protector? Forms a protective cone guaranteed to guard you against all the horrors of a nuclear blast, no matter how close to it you might be. Call now and receive their limited edition clear NuCone so you can view the beautiful devastation around you under full protection. That is the NuCone Portable Nuclear Holocaust Protector, and I personally guarantee that that does not work. All right, we are here with the quote of the day. Very topical one to start off the week. Comes to us from Omar Bradley, a former U.S. military general in the Cold War. That quote is, "Ours is a world of nuclear giants and ethical infants. If we continue to develop our technology without wisdom or prudence, our servant may prove to be our executioner." That, again, is Omar Bradley, former U.S. military general during the Cold War. And I felt like that was a topical quote today. For those of you who didn't know, over the weekend there was an alert sent out over all of Hawaii, over all data carriers, and they sent out a message to all Hawaiians and people, anybody that was on the island of Hawaii. That includes people that were on vacation there from other countries and blah, 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 blah. This message came across all cell phones. Ballistic message threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Okay, so that message stood out there on people's phones for 38 minutes until somebody finally discovered that it was a human error. They were supposed to be testing that system, not actually implementing it. And in that 38 minutes, a bunch of Hawaiians, as the message said, they sought immediate shelter. They went into buildings they thought were more. They went into buildings where they thought they'd be better protected. There was, pretty good pandemonium on the island, as you might expect. It was interesting to me because for those of you who follow the podcast, I was in Hawaii not that long ago, and this did cross my mind while I was sitting around there thinking about, we're the closest target for a North Korean missile launch, like by far. And you drive around the island, and there are sirens everywhere left over from World War II. They're there for tsunami warnings and that type of thing. And so, the idea pops into your head whenever you see one of those, like, well, man, I wonder if one of those went off. And, it's a military area, especially I was on Oahu, which is where Pearl Harbor is. So there's helicopters and stuff doing test runs all the time, and I remember saying to my brother, looking up at one of these helicopters or looking up at one of these planes that was going overhead, and I said, what if you looked up and that had a North Korean flag on the side of it? And he looked at me like, holy fuck, dude. And I was like, yeah, man, like it's weird to think about. And then, not even a few weeks later, this message gets sent across. It's a reminder of how close we are. You don't really think about it I mean, the thought is maybe we shouldn't even be thinking about it. I mean, the chances of it happening are pretty remote, and the if it does happen, it would be swift and quick, and some of us might get a good view of some terrifying things. But yeah, it's a reminder of how close we are, because I don't know, like in my lifetime, I've never felt this. I've never kind of felt a I don't know. It's kind of hard to put a word to what the feeling is. I wouldn't even call it fear or threat. It's just something that's in the air of like, what the fuck is going on? And how is this going to play out? And part of it is because you don't, the two people that are kind of that the two people that are creating this situation are, they're unstable people. We're not sure what they're thinking or what they're going to do next, and it's a scary situation to be in. Like the quote says, they're ethical infants. And they both are. They're both people that have grown up in sheltered environments, being told they're basically royalty their whole life and not having to work for anything. They are ethical infants. You can, any of the stories you read out of that Fire and Fury book, any excerpts will give you the impression that Donald Trump isn't much more than a kindergartner, and likewise for Kim Jong-un. Like, it's obvious he's literally raised to be royalty, and we know that tends to not breed proper psychological perspective. So it's kind of a weird spot to be in, and I mean, only people that lived through the Cold War can really relate. And even then, like, all the only reference we have for it now is textbooks and documentaries and that type of thing, movies even, to try and give us that feeling. But now being in it, you realize how those movies, they couldn't give you that feeling unless you'd known what it meant to really, think about not being surprised to wake up tomorrow and find out that a city has been wiped out. It's an uneasy feeling, and maybe it's something that is better left not thought about. But then nothing will change if people don't think about it, if people don't talk about it, if people don't try to impact it in some way. So it reminded me of a story, actually. I read, it's in one of my books that's in my bathroom, and it's also, I read it on, I referenced it a little bit on one of the large Slackline episodes. In 1983, there was a Soviet military person, a lieutenant colonel of the Air Defense Forces named Stanislav Petrov. And in 1983, just a few weeks after the Soviets had shot down a Korean plane over their airspace, they received a early warning signal of a nuclear strike against a Soviet target from the U.S. And all protocols were to immediately launch a retaliatory attack. But for some reason, Stanislav held his ground and had a gut feeling that this was a false alarm. For some reason, he risked the lives of a lot of people on a gut feeling, and it turned out to be a false alarm. And he prevented nuclear war by following just that thing, and by following just that instinct. And it's freaky to look back on that and go like, holy shit, the world was literally one guy's choice, one guy's not even choice, like hard stance against launching this missile. Like, he disobeyed direct orders in the fucking Soviet military to not launch a nuclear strike. And I mean, the guy's a fucking hero. He just died last year, actually, in September, not long before the anniversary of the deed that he did. So, yeah, I found that to be an interesting story, kind of a inspirational story of perhaps people getting a conscience about them in a moment like this. And it makes me think about, well, a guy like Trump, he has his finger on the button, and even a guy like Kim Jong-un, like he has his finger on the button. But there are, people in place that have to turn keys, that have to obey orders, that have to actually push buttons, and put in, keywords and passwords and all that type of shit. It's interesting to think about if somewhere along the line, one of those people would just be like, nope. And even if it was like the very last person, like this, like it was the very last person that could have said like, nah, don't really feel like murdering millions of people today. And it'd be interesting to see what would happen, if people would just get replaced until somebody actually did it, if there was kind of like maybe a mass mutiny for the sake of humanity in a weird way. Like, academically and as like a storyteller, I find that to be intriguing. I find maybe that to be an interesting piece of fiction, or potentially a very interesting piece of history to look back on if something like that ever played out. Academically, for sure, it would be absolutely fascinating to find out just how that type of thing would happen, the aftermath of it, would there, like, how, like, even the stuff that's happening right now with, Trump and all that stuff is academically fascinating, purely from a standpoint of, well, if this was happening in the Cold War, he'd be gone a long time ago. If this was, like, what are the outcomes of potential cabinet members and vice presidents and chiefs of staff and stuff going to jail, potentially even the president going to jail. Like, what is the outcomes of this stuff? They don't really, like in Canada, we have a non-confidence vote. If people start to get sick of the government, the government can kind of overthrow itself and call an election. They don't really have that in the U.S. They just kind of have a chain of command, and the people that are immediately under Trump, they've been propping him up, so they're obviously not far from his his ideal vision of where things are going. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting conversation, I think, to have about now, and that Hawaiian message really kind of freaked me out, and I thought I'd bring it up and chat about it. But I also, I want to talk about the second part of this quote a little bit too, because the first part references the nuclear giants and ethical infants. Second sentence: if we continue to develop our technology without wisdom or prudence, our servant may prove to be our executioner. And I find that to be interesting in a few contexts, like in the context of nuclear giants and ethical infants. I think that you can argue that servant in that context would mean the people they've elected to serve, or the people that supposedly serve the people. The high command that ends up actually launching those things, and I think it can also mean the technology. We use it as a servant. We use it as a replacement for the duties that we don't want to do, including now military operations and distancing ourselves from the actual horrors of war, as far as drone strikes and stuff like that are concerned. So from that perspective, technology, our servant, becomes our executioner, and that opens up whole new avenues of threats of artificial intelligence, which is something that a lot of high-level scientists are really concerned about now. People like Stephen Hawking, people like Brian Greene, they regularly chat about kind of the existential threat of artificial intelligence and the idea of it getting smarter than we are, and eventually kind of overthrowing humanity in a weird way. Like, these things are these things are the subject of science fiction, like Terminator and iRobot and stuff like that. But they're science fiction brings those questions up because they're real questions. They're real possibilities of things that could happen if people don't take responsibility for the stuff that we create, all the way from weapons to things like 3D printers. I talked on one of the episodes about people making guns out of 3D printers, and it goes along with my philosophy of, well, if it can be done, it will be done, and you can't stop it. You can't, like, as soon as a technology, as soon as a new idea comes to form, you can't stop it. And especially now with the spread of information and the access to technology and the speed at which we can create things and the speed at which we can transfer information, and there's kind of no limit to who can do what eventually. Obviously, like, materials like uranium and shit like that are hard to get your hands on, but it kind of gets easier and easier from a standpoint of, like, well, if I really wanted to order some uranium or make that type of deal, or find some high value metals so I could make some computer chips or something, because I'm a really smart person and I'm working out of my basement with some soldering equipment and like an electrical engineering degree to try and put together some AI robot. There's dark web, there's black market for all that type of stuff, and if you want it, you can find it. And as people again share information quickly, and as people, in my opinion, get smarter and smarter, younger and younger, you're gonna start to see people experimenting with this type of stuff in their own homes. Because again, there's no way you can stop it. There's no way you can monitor that. You can monitor the few scientists that maybe work for the government under military funding. And even them, I mean, they're purely working for the worst part of it. They're making weapons out of it. And yeah, other technologies get born out of that, and there's benefits to, kind of a smaller military industrial complex, as far as its propensity to breed innovation. But I would argue you don't need war to breed innovation in technology. I mean, something like the nuclear bomb itself, I mean, it runs off of atomic energy, nuclear energy. It's something that we use to power a lot of places around the world, and it has a bad connotation because there is safety concerns involved with leakage and radiation and stuff, and also because people associate it with weaponry, when it's really like one of the safest and most environmentally friendly forms of energy generation. Kind of getting back to the dangers of this stuff. We have to and taking responsibility for it. Like, I think that we should, but that needs to come from. It needs to come from like an education standpoint. It needs to come from, from teaching future generations that we don't want to build weapons of war and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of the only way, because it's strange that we really can't learn even from like really recent history and like devastation of and devastation of like Japan and just the Cold War in general and nuclear nuclear stockpiling, and we have reduced those things, but there's still more than enough nukes in the ground in all these countries to annihilate the whole world. And so, like, what's the use in that? I don't understand what the use in that is. And honestly, like, of all the ways to go, of all the reasons that humanity could find a way to, I guess, destroy itself, the idea that it's just like a dick measuring contest between two idiots is super depressing. You know, like there have been very few wars throughout time that have been justified. I would argue that World War II was one of them. It doesn't mean that all actions that happened in World War II are justified. Maybe it does. That maybe that's another chat for another podcast. But those were evils that were trying to take over the world. And I think that we have those evils now, but they're not military forces crossing borders. They're people in high level positions funneling money to themselves. And I feel like I could get behind a fight for. I hesitate to say anything about participating in war and stuff and what I would or wouldn't do, because I've never been in that situation, never been close to that situation, thankfully, and thank you to the people who have fought in the past and continue to fight for, so that, the rest of us don't have to. But, there are a lot of things going on that I would argue don't have to be fought for. People that are starving and whatnot in North Korea, I would argue is something that could be fought for. But how do you solve that problem with a nuclear strike? I don't understand that, because the people, again, the people that are the problem are not all of North Korea or all of Syria or something like that. Like, the people that are the problem are people that have found themselves in high level positions and are incredibly corrupt and are willing to, kill people around them and that type of thing to hold power. Like Kim Jong-un is the problem, and the people around him. Donald Trump and the people around him are the problem, not necessarily the people that they've convinced that their ideas are good. Because, there are a whole bunch of factors that play into how people can do that, and lack of education, lack of information is number one at the top of that list. And so you can't really blame people sometimes for getting caught up in that type of stuff, but you can, I think, blame the people that are perpetuating it and knowingly perpetuating it at the top and causing existential dangers for the rest of the world, again, purely on ego trips. And when you think about, well, if these people are the real problem, again, like a nuclear strike, you might take out Kim Jong-un. You probably would, but you wouldn't you also take out, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are innocent in the whole thing, and then possibly get that done against your own country. Like, there's no logic in that. Where is the logic in any of that? When you have like elitely trained people that can go in and take people out, drones that can snipe people from thousands of miles away, like, If the goal is to just kill Kim Jong-un, I think that could have been done by now. I don't. I have guesses at reasons as to why people don't, and why we would have a whole military force running into Iraq to quote unquote free people from Saddam Hussein, but we don't have the same sort of thing going into Korea. There's a lot of factors that play into that. But the one thing that I can say with certainty is that nuking each other won't solve anything other than the few main people would be dead, and along with a lot of other people that didn't deserve to. So, the idea of world destruction at the hands of egomaniacal psychopathic idiots is pretty depressing. And so maybe we'll leave it there for today. A nice depressing note for everybody to end on. That quote again is, "Ours is a world of nuclear giants and ethical infants. If we continue to develop our technology without wisdom or prudence, our servant may prove to be our executioner." And that is Omar Bradley. He was a U.S. military general during the Cold War. And that quote, again, brought to us by NuCone, portable nuclear holocaust protector. Hear that fatal whistle above your head? Get a message from your government to seek immediate shelter? Make sure you have NuCone Portable Nuclear Holocaust Protector. Forms a protective cone guaranteed to guard you against all the horrors of a nuclear blast, no matter how close you are. Call now and receive their limited edition Clear NuCone so you can view the beautiful devastation around you and remain fully protected. That, again, is NuCone Portable Nuclear Holocaust Protector. You have been listening to the Quote of the Day Slackline. Thank you very much again to Crooked Spies for providing the music. Thanks to anybody who is listening. If you haven't yet, check out the Instagram at the.slack.line, Twitter at slackline_radio. YouTube is the Slackline Podcast. I am the boss.
The boss is coming.
That's a made-up dumb fairy tale name, you.
You have been listening to the Quote of the Day. Thanks to anybody who has been listening. We'll see you all tomorrow for another quote. Have a good day.
I'm gonna call you out, 'cause you ain't what you claim to be. Say you're a working man, but you ain't got no grit, you got no glory. What kind of man are you? Say you're noble, but you're just a goddamn fool. Go on, yeah, go, you do, yeah, you better run, or you're staring down the barrel of my shotgun. Yeah, my shotgun. I'm gonna call you out, 'cause you ain't what you claim to be. Steal from the people of this land. The time is done for being sorry. I swear you're better.